Hello, Chris here, one half of the Tropestormers podcast. Just letting you know, the following podcast definitely contains massive spoilers, adult themes, and possibly bad language. Basically, all the good stuff. If that isn't your cup of tea, maybe give it a miss. You have been warned. Abandon all trope, all ye who tropestorm.
One sec, mate. I've got to let the cat through the door. It's all going peaked on.
The narrative universe is in a state of chaos. Left unchecked, tropes have run rampant, leaving nothing but dystopia in their wake. All that stands in their way are two men in search of utopia. Two men intent on slaying dead horses, exposing jumping sharks, and finding someone called Mary Sue. They are the Tropestormers.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Tropestormers. I'm Chris Jeeves, and as ever, I'm ably assisted by my Midlands correspondent, Mr. Jim Carlberg. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, sir. How are you? How have you been doing?
Yeah, not too bad. It's been a little while since we spoke.
It really has. It really has. My study has finished, and I'm ready to Tropestorm well and truly. My true study begins. My true training.
Are you moving up from Padawan to Jedi?
That's the hope. That's the hope. I want to be sat there in my little chair doing nothing on the sort of Tropestorming Jedi Council, so to speak.
That's what we all aspire to, let's be honest.
And speaking, a little bit of a segue here, in terms of the sort of premise of what we're doing about, we're going to look at this film in terms of the tropes, right?
Right, so, Jim, what are we here for? We're here to storm tropes. Well, what does that mean?
Well, as the Tropestormers, we have to pick out story beats, or aka tropes, and weigh up whether... Not whether we like this film necessarily or not, but whether it works, how cohesively it comes together, and whether it deserves either being in the heavenly heights of Utopia or the fiery Hades-like pits of dystopia, based on our patented, unpatented, wholly unscientific scoring system as developed by our good selves, which... you might care to explain, Chris.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we're going to do two tropes a piece. We'll present our trope, discuss it, and then we'll score at the end. Don't do draws here. We always have an outright decision verdict, be it positive, utopian, or negative, dystopian, and we'll have an auxiliary trope ready to wheel out in the eventuality of a draw. It's sudden death. And as Jim said, we don't pull punches here. A lot of films we absolutely love, we've ended up panning, and vice versa. So we kind of fly by the seat of our pants, and we're not really sure how this is going to work out. But strap in, because it'll be a fun ride.
Excelente, mi amigo.
There is a disturbance in the force. The Tropestormers have a new website, Tropestormers.com. If they could be turned, they would become a powerful ally. If they only knew the power of the dark side. Visit Tropestormers.com. It is your destiny. There is no escape. Don't make me destroy you.
Well, we're back, and we're back to talk tropes in another movie, and this one's it's a bit of a sort of guilty pleasure of mine, this one. I'm sure we'll unpack it very shortly, but is there anything you've been up to, or any news you've got for us? I've been made aware of something. I've been spending a lot of time with a young person, and we looked at The Thing very recently.
Yep. Yes, we did.
Really enjoyed talking about that. So if you are a big fan of John Carpenter, go check that out, part of the back catalogue. But there is a computer game called Among Us, which you may have heard of. Have you come across that, Chris?
Mate, I've tumbled down a deep Football Manager wormhole. It kind of explains why I'm wearing a sheepskin right now in the middle of summer.
Yeah, your podcast mic has got one of those weird sort of John Motson things around the outside of it.
Yeah, so unless it's...
The Des Lynam Tash is coming on.
I do my best, sir. I do my best for Queen and Country. I have resurrected my Mega Drive, and that's plugged in. I bought a rather snazzy... basically, it connects through HDMI now, so it upscales everything to a super sexy 1080 1920. And it's a complete game changer. I look forward to
still holding a pad that feels like it's going to cut into your hands.
Yeah, well, still holding the least ergonomic thing ever created by a human being. I look forward to welcoming you round now. Hopefully, all bets are off with this pandemic jazz, and we can have another cheeky round of Micro Machines.
Yeah, man, I'll hold you to that for sure. But this Among Us stuff that the kids are playing these days. It was very reminiscent of The Thing. There's this idea of an imposter being among you on a space station or a spaceship.
Okay.
And you having to work as a team to fathom out who the imposter is.
Okay.
Who resembles one of the crew. It sent us back to our chat about The Thing. And yeah, it's definitely something. It's a bit of a rabbit hole I've tumbled down because, you know, when it's a bit, you get in these YouTube holes and things like that where there's music, there's merchandise all around it. You know, it's taken over my life a little bit. I
mean, I'm guessing this is quite like an immersive role-playing game. Am I right?
It's kind of no, not really. It's like it's a bit odd because they're having parties and things like that with it now, like birthday parties based around Among Us. So it's very quick and it's very, but the whole idea of it is the chat that surrounds it, the accusations, the kind of mistrust and distrust that's sown throughout. That kind of where the kind of crux of the game gets its popularity, I think.
Okay, fair enough. Interesting.
And then I also watched Loki recently as well. Yeah, as closely as yesterday, I watched the first episode of Loki, which was
and your thoughts?
Some mind-bending time travel stuff going on there.
Well, I actually finally got round to watching and finishing WandaVision.
Oh yeah, that equally is kind of trippy, I guess.
Yeah, no, the whole Red Witch thing, didn't see that coming. I mean, I'm not anywhere near as close to the comics and the original source material as yourself, so I didn't see any of that coming. I didn't know what to expect, and at first I wasn't really sure, but it kind of worked. It was very enjoyable, if at times a little confusing, but overall I'd give it a big thumbs up.
I do tend to think with the Marvel stuff, the cast and the sort of charisma that a lot of people have within these shows kind of carries these kind of slightly ropier ideas through that go from the comics that might not translate as well in lesser hands.
I guess, yeah. I mean, they've got they've got budgets of like world conquest proportions at Marvel Studios now. So yeah, they can, if it's not being carried by the script, then the visuals are more than gonna make up for it. And I mean, if you're a kid watching that, I mean, it's just like a eye porn, isn't it? It's like a visual wet dream of just like superhero stuff going on. But it hasn't obviously crossed over into Michael Bay territory where I get motion sickness and don't really understand what's going on anymore.
I don't know if you recall, but there's a quote in it that got me right smack bang in the center of the feels, which was the Vision's quote on grief. Do you remember that?
For the purposes of now, maybe just give me a quick synopsis.
What is grief if not love persevering? And I thought, whoa,
that's deep. I liked Vision a lot.
Yeah, and White Vision as well. What did you reckon of that?
Yeah, it took me a while to kind of understand what was going on. That was pretty cool. Like, they ended up sort of teaming up, having some very interesting existential conversations about things.
Well, that's it. It was like in between having a massive scrap with laser heads, they also took apart some philosophy as well and some ethical problems, which I thought was quite bold.
I thought the actress that played the bad witch was good, like a really good character and very well played. I thought her performance was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hoping for good things for Loki really as well. I think you should check that out, mate. It's definitely a strong start based on last couple of nights' viewings. And speaking of which, why are we here? Why there's a listener here? Obviously, they want to hear our lightning hot takes on all things Marvel and Netflix. What's the amuse-bouche they've got to look forward to today?
Okay, so shall I give you some cheeky build-up? How about that?
Go for it, sir. That's what you're here for. You are the man.
That's what I do.
Avec le plan.
So, this film was based on a video game that I never actually played, but I know a lot of people did play, and I probably didn't play it because I was playing Championship Manager which was the forerunner to Football Manager, whilst other people were playing this. And I remember people loving it and it being quite scary. I did flirt with the idea of going back and playing it, but I kind of thought, well, I'm not going to get the nostalgia hit from it. And I'll probably just go back and think, well, this is absolutely butters in terms of like graphics, so I'm out. Or it would just be incredibly scary and I wouldn't get through it. We are bringing together two iconic monsters from two separate universes. This film features none other than Spud from Trainspotting, and it spawned many...
Hopefully sounds incontinent.
It spawned quite a few sequels where the quality has somewhat dropped. And a cheeky little bit of trivia, Ridley Scott hated this film, and the rather contrary Jim Cameron admitted that he enjoyed it. Placed it in his third favourite of the Alien movie franchise.
So we know we're dealing with the Alien franchise here.
And we are indeed.
And two iconic monsters coming together, you said.
Indeed, I did. I've got another little cheeky one that might help with what the other half of this mashup is. So the director revealed that Arnold Schwarzenegger was offered to reprise his role as Dutch in a movie Cameo, but Schwarzenegger only went and nailed getting the Governor of California role and wasn't able to be a part of this project. So if you haven't figured it out by now, we're doing Alien versus Predator, people.
Yeah, A.V.P.
Is that what we're going to refer to it going forwards?
Well, A.V.P. could be a possibility.
A.V.P., yeah, I mean...
That's shorthand if we're stuck for time.
I need your clothes, your boots, and you to subscribe to the Tropestormers podcast. Do it now!
Okay, so Alien vs. Predator dropped in 2004. I went to the movies to watch this, and I was a giddy ball of excitement. I'm not going to lie, I was giddy like a schoolgirl. I had incredibly high expectations. And I think I came away from it initially actually being fairly satisfied, particularly with the twist at the end. What about yourself, Mr. Carlberg?
Well, for similar reasons, I think. I actually played the original game. And there'd been I think Dark Horse Comics had done a big run of sort of Alien versus Predator stuff because they had the sort of comic book rights to all this. So that it'd been quite well explored, and the nature of these two monsters, they lend themselves very well to comic book art and panels and storyboard type action sequences. So yeah, I was very excited when I heard this was going to be a thing. You know, the sort of versus premise, I guess, is always a little bit kind of hokey. So you have to caveat that a little bit, but yeah, based on my enjoyment of the two franchises, I was looking forward to this a lot.
Well, that's interesting, something that you've touched on there that we were speaking about before we were recording, about how versus movies are now very much back in vogue with the Kong versus Godzilla, which I'm yet to see, but you were saying that is a worthwhile romp.
Oh, romp is the word. The kind of action and the scale and the kind of just fun that movie has, it really sort of lends itself well. And I suppose that's an interesting thing because tonally these two franchises, they're a bit all over the place a lot of the time. So it was interesting when I first saw this to see where it would go.
I mean, I think it kind of started fairly promisingly. I think so. The director Paul W.S. Anderson, he's had his directorial career is a bit all over the place. Mortal Kombat, which is also another film that's had a reboot. We did a whole Storm in a Tea break about reboots, so go back and check that out. Mortal Kombat is a film I'm yet to see this time round. I've obviously seen the previous one, and I've seen the amazing special effects PlayStation 1 graphics from the sequel that was made in the late 90s. If you haven't seen it, we'll try and post a link because it is pretty special. There's a bit...
Is it called Abomination or Annihilation or something like that?
Some twattery like that.
One of them fits better than the others.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit where it's, if you YouTube, like search for like Mortal Kombat Annihilation Liu Kang Dragon or something, there's just the naffest PlayStation 1 graphics, more metamorphosis where he becomes a dragon. It has to be seen. And doesn't the guy also become Goro as well? And it's got like it's just so bad. Like his forehead just like elongates.
Yeah, he becomes this like
a Hydra or
weird
something.
Hydra thing that looks like it's been just yanked straight out of Jason the Argonauts, but looks even more garbage than that. Like that's Harryhausen I'm slandering there, but come on, we're talking about the mid 2000s here, aren't we? New Line Cinema and things like that. So it's it just when you think the dragon looked bad, it's like no, we can outdo this. Check out how shit this Hydra looks.
Yeah. He also did a film that I used to really like back in the day. It was one of those that I sort of must have taped off like Channel 4 or something. It really used to sort of give me the chills watching it. It was very creepy space horror, Event Horizon. I haven't seen it in probably like 15 years, and it might be absolutely naff, but it's got Sam Neill, and I just remember being like gripped and terrified in equal measure by it.
Yeah, it's a trippy, creepy movie, that. Possibly one for the future,
yeah,
maybe.
No, I think that could be a good one. And he also had a heavy hand involved in lots of Resident Evil films as well.
Yeah, which seems to be the longest way of being able to marry a supermodel. It seems to just like, I'm going to cast this woman and direct these films until I can marry her.
What, so he's married to Mia
He is, yeah. Or was.
Was. TBC.
Yeah, the Mia Jovovich vehicle. I guess this Alien versus Predator movie isn't a million miles away in some respects from that kind of thing.
What, from Resident Evil?
Yeah, it's got very similar elements. I mean, if we look at some of the observations that you've put down here, I had a good laugh looking at this list.
You love my observations.
I love them, mate. I love them. We've got the sort of Thing vibes because it's set in like an Antarctic base, isn't it?
Yeah, very much Thing vibes, especially that sequence where they first arrive on the island near the Antarctic. Bouvet Island? I'm not sure how you pronounce it. But they're sort of like knocking about what looks like an abandoned... It's very similar setup to The Thing. And then you've got like... Probably one of the best performances in the film is the penguin that sort of surprises everybody.
Yeah, overlooked there for an animal Oscar, I would say.
Some of his finest work. I mean, he didn't have a lot to work with considering the humans that were available at the time.
It's just reminded me of the crossover of Pingu and The Thing, which I'm a big fan
of. We spoke about that in the Thing podcast, and if you haven't seen that, just do yourself a favour. Once you're done chowing down on Mortal Kombat's incredible graphics, check out the Thingu, a mash up of Pingu and The Thing. It's perfect.
You know, it delivers what it promises.
I mean, that's your sort of corner, internet corner. The darker fringes of the web is kind of that, and paleontology is you.
Yeah, and one of the things here, we've got the shit segue graphics to show position in temple.
I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
And I think he's guilty of this, Anderson, in the Resident Evil films. These sort of like naff, sort of like dental advert graphics.
Specific.
The sort of thing you might see on Soccer Saturday.
I think you kind of nailed it there, because it does crop up in Resident Evil. It kind of feels like he just got a job lot.
Obviously, you've got these two alien presences, basically. But what is the conceit in terms of getting them to mash together and bash together in the manner that they do?
Well, they do have like a segue that sort of explains this, don't they? The ridiculously good-looking Italian archaeologist and linguist deciphers some hieroglyphics, and in his very hammy acting style explains to us in a cutaway. So roughly every 100 years or so, the predators come to Earth, and they basically use us as cattle in a giant hunting Hunger Games exercise that's all about proving your manhood. They breed the aliens, use the humans as hosts, and then basically they set about trying to kill all the aliens to prove that they are like totally badass predator people.
It's like that's the official title. You get a little plaque with totally badass predator person with a spinal column or something.
That's what you come away from. It's etched into a human skull that's still attached to the spinal column.
Nice. They wouldn't want it any other way. Those weird crab-faced wrestler people. Okay, yeah. So it's like the ultimate hunt, isn't it?
Yeah, it follows a similar pattern to the other Predator films. And also, I guess, a little bit with Alien as well, in that the humans are sort of basically being hunted and picked off one by one.
Yeah, it's kind of lands itself quite well in the theme of the games, in which it was very much. I know that the marketing for this film was like, "Whoever wins, we lose."
That's a strong tagline.
Yeah, it was. It worked quite well, I feel, and it was in keeping with the video games. Is very much like the Colonial Marines getting caught in the middle of this crossfire between the two, and you can play as all three, and it's a very different experience. And it's somewhat captured in this movie.
I mean, we normally do a cheeky little rundown of the cast, but I mean, I've covered Spud. I think the only other person of note, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong here, is Wayland himself, Charles Bishop Wayland, as played by Lance Henriksen, who I was I said I was giddy when I went to watch this. This really heightened it, because obviously he plays Bishop, well, in Aliens, as a replicant synth. I don't know what they call them, skin job, something like that.
I think called synths in this
universe.
Yeah.
I think that might be right. Yeah, he's probably one of the strongest performances in this film. Yeah, I just thought it was a really nice little sort of nod. Unfortunately, he dies in fairly heroic circumstances in this film. Basically tries to set a predator person alight with a butane canister or something. Highly ambitious.
It's a very, very secondary school approach.
It would have been a kind of Lynx Africa at secondary school. And it probably would have done more damage to the predator, to be honest.
Yeah, did you ever burn your armpits with those?
What?
Oh my God. Like if you didn't too hard.
As in like if you didn't have it far enough away. Yeah. So I thought you meant you used it like a flamethrower under your arms.
Oh no! I don't know what school you went to, but we never did that.
I mean, I never did the fire thing, because there's always that rumor circulating that if it went back into the can, the flame, it would explode in your hand and you'd lose your hand. And that prospect was more terrifying than the fun that could be had with just making little like blowtorchy bits.
Yeah, God bless the urban myths.
In that instance, it served me well, I feel. I've got both my hands currently, so I'll give you a hand update next Trope Storm, just in case things have changed.
I mean, what's interesting about the sort of Lance Henriksen or Wayland example is that kind of is evidence, isn't it, of the kind of warrior code that the predators have, because initially he's not treated as a threat, because we find out he's a cancer
predator
sufferer.
has cancer vision, as well as like infrared and heat and whatever else,
and the puppy filters and things like that.
But yeah, the point I was also going to make was him dying obviously screws the whole Prometheus movie, because he's far older in that, and he's on the ship in Prometheus. So obviously Ridley Scott didn't feel that Alien vs Predator have a worthy addition to the canon.
Yeah. Wow. Hot take. Well, Ridley obviously clearly hated this. Jim Cameron might have thought differently.
I get the feeling with Jim Cameron that if Ridley Scott liked something, he just wouldn't like it on principle. From everything I've read.
Just oppositional defiance from...
Everything I've read about Jim Cameron just paints a very interesting picture. Kind of like mad genius.
Hello there, I am Sir Ian McKellen, and you are listening to the Tropestormers podcast.
Really, it's all about the smackdown, and we've not really spoken much about that, given that the sort of premise of the thing. I mean, some of I find some of the sort of fights in this spectacular.
Yeah, I think
in places.
The fight scene where I think it's just before Scar marks her, and he picks up the xenomorph and just basically spins it round and just twats it into a bunch of pillars. And then he basically, like American football, tackles it to the ground in like a long run, like shoulder barge, and then like lays the smackdown. It's pretty epic.
Yeah, that's pretty satisfying, that charge, when it's just, it just makes this thing that's supposed to be this, in every other film is seen to be this physical force. And I've played Alien Isolation, and if you're scared of a game, my God, that thing makes the alien xenomorph feel invincible. But in this film, wow, the Predator is just an absolute beast, and I think they give as good as they get, don't they? The xenomorphs, there's a couple that are ended very easily. There's a couple that put up a fight. Basically, the alien queen manifests itself as a T-Rex at the end, pretty much. It's a bit more lively than in kind of aliens, and they managed to take it down by the human predator team up in the end. So yeah, in terms of enjoyment of this film, I by and large, I enjoyed all those aspects of it, and I'm not quite sure it delivered on the sort of excitement factor that you and I both seem to have going into it. But in terms of the kind of the set piece moments, it seems to deliver for me.
It's time for Jim's first trope.
Let's hit up some tropes. So I'm going to start with my first trope, I think. My first trope is looking at this idea of the whole premise of this film. They need a contrivance to try and get these two monsters to fight each other. And so they take the elements of the kind of warrior culture of the predators and their kind of honor code, which they're a bit sort of liberal with at times, I find. But generally speaking, we've already spoken about how they kind of don't go for Wayland because he's ill and therefore not a threat, whereas the kind of more disposable sort of merc characters with their Uzis and their flamethrowers and their SMGs and things like that are dispatched more readily by the predators.
But doesn't that sort of echoes what happens in the first Predator film, doesn't it? Because there's a woman who sort of ends up part of Dutch's gang, and she makes it all the way through to the end. But she's not got a very prominent role, but I think it's a similar sort of thing in that she's not perceived to be a direct threat or worthy of the Predator's attention.
Yeah, it's a very sort of 80s, 90s outlook on that.
Yeah, nothing like.
But that's different in this film, obviously, because we have Alexa Woods as our female
and a very
protagonist.
strong lead. But we'll come on to that later.
Oh, thanks, Alexa. Yeah, so Aliens. The idea of this coming together is based on how can we contrive to get these two alien races together. And I suppose one thing I always find is quite surprising. It'd be very easy to set this out in outer space, right? And just have there just be a convergence of these things, like the video game, which is just set on a colony somewhere where the xenomorph or alien is already present, and the predators come to hunt that way. They kind of roam the galaxy, so to speak. And they go on a very different path here in the sense that I don't know whether it's just whether they screen test these things or they focus group it, and it seems to be the case that it's just going to fly better if this is set on Earth.
I did read some stuff up on this actually when I was doing research, and apparently they did want to set it in the future and in space, but the studio overruled, and so it got set more in present times on Earth. Interesting.
Oh, okay. So that kind of lends itself well to this trope in the sense that they have to come up with the idea that it was aliens all along. So in order to I guess provide a bit more of a credible grounding for this meeting, they kind of do this thing that a lot of films do and a lot of movies do and literature does in kind of rewriting the origins of history.
To unpack this a little bit for the uninitiated, so aliens all along, am I to understand that what you're saying is when we were scrabbling around barely much better than just like glorified monkeys, aliens kind of came along and helped us out, gave us a bit of a leg up with some basics and some technology. It kind of is used as a way to explain how we suddenly were able to build magnificent temples and stuff in simpler times.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's this kind of like they talk about the Mayan calendar and the Mayan understanding of the stars, and that is something that's shown in the visuals of this movie. I suppose aliens all along is a bit confusing, seeing as we're talking about alien. And when we say aliens, we don't necessarily mean the alien, because they're very sort of scratchy, bitey, stabby types, aren't they? They don't seem very capable of creating stuff. I kind of mean more just extraterrestrials coming and providing the sort of bedrock of civilization and society, which they give to the predators in this instance. The predators are the ones that are technologically advanced, albeit have this kind of primitive honor code. They are responsible for the engineering behind the pyramids, astrology, astronomy, all the sort of bases of human science and culture and technology.
I don't know if there wasn't like a xenomorph alien equivalent to like Shakespeare or Einstein or anything, but you kind of get the impression that they're kind of like space's equivalent of a great white shark. They are nature's ultimately refined killing machine.
The ultimate predator, just to add confusion to this layer of...
just to blur the lines a little bit more in case people were going cross-eyed.
So alien predator versus the predator.
Predator man, predator people.
Yeah. That was a working title initially.
Yeah, until they came up with a snappier zinger.
Yeah.
But in the film, before they actually get to Bouvet Island and they're in transit, they're talking about this temple that they've sort of looked at from satellite imagery and stuff and done some basic digging around. And they do name check the Cambodian, Egyptian, and Aztec or Inca, I think. Apparently there's markings of all of them, and that plays into how like these civilizations built amazing things like Angkor Wat and Machu Picchu and all that sort of stuff, when the rest of the world was still scrabbling around in the dirt, flinging poo at each other.
And also, I guess, the reason they fall, so, when supposed civilizations such as Atlantis and things like that, when they disappear, possibly down to the fact that predators have nuked the area.
More than nuked. It's those funny little arm box things that they have with like crazy little hieroglyphics that sort of beep and then just basically obliterate anything remotely close by. Yeah, Arnie still survived somehow. Yeah, convenient nap blowing everything up and totally obliterating a civilization.
So we end up with this, and then they go one further in this and say, so, okay, we've got Mayan pyramids. Let's have one 200 feet below the ice in Antarctica, which is a bold step, really. They could have done a lot less than that, I suppose. But I guess one of the issues with this, and I think the second film in this series suffers from this slightly, is how you keep this out of the sort of bounds of being visible by modern society in the same way that you had in The Thing. There was this ultimate force of destruction. Now you've got two of these things. This can't really go on if you're going to set it on Earth in the sort of cityscape or the kind of everyday life that eventually happens in the sequels. But you've got this sort of aliens all along conceit is a reason to set it in the abstract, in this kind of hidden sort of subculture of human history that's entirely fictional. But I kind of like when there's some examples of these over the years have been good and bad. I think you've got the infamous example is the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
The less said about that
example with Indy, isn't it? Yeah, there was an aliens all along there. That's definitely the case. Is they do a similar sort of thing with Alien versus Predator, and will remain to be seen, I suppose, whether we think that's a good thing or not.
Well, looks like it's time for Chris's first trope.
So let's talk a little bit more about the story. You're going to talk about a little bit about the sort of characters a little bit more for what they're worth. You've said that Wayland's obviously a stronger presence within that. We've got quite a good cast in this, really, all things considered. Colin Salmon, Tommy Flanagan. They've been in things Peaky Blinders and Sons of Anarchy. Colin Salmon's been in the Bond movies. Got a bit of an unknown, relatively speaking, in Sana Lathon as Alexa Woods, who's the main character. We've got a strong female lead in this, which is very...
It's not very...
in contrast to the original sort of Predator movie, but very much in keeping with the Alien franchise.
I kind of felt that the characters weren't particularly fleshed out. And I can understand that in some respects, in what's the point in fleshing out a character that's not going to have much screen time and is ultimately going to die pretty quickly. I'm looking at you, woman that looks like Guile from Street Fighter, who I think has 2 lines of dialogue and dies within like the first 30 minutes.
Yeah, she had an easy day.
Yeah, she also has like the most awful sort of early noughties haircut thing going on. I don't even know how to begin to describe it. It's kind of like 3 competing haircuts at once. It's almost like a noughties mullet.
She actually just got paid in the haircut. That was her payment
Fair
for the
enough.
film, I think. There's 2 lines of dialogue, we'll give you a haircut, love.
As you've said, the lead character, Alexa Woods, her and Wayland, I felt like the most believable, fleshed out characters in all of this. The rests were kind of disposable fodder in one shape or form or another. Even Spud, I kind of feel like they tried to flesh him out with some like little quirks. Like he was extra Scottish and he was pathologically obsessed with taking photographs for his children of what he was up to, which was kind of sweet, but it just felt like they didn't really try particularly hard with any of these characters. Almost like they were like, look, we know they're all going to die in various different sort of gruesome or awful ways. So, let's invest in certain characters who've got to have a bit more longevity in screen time. One of the characters that has one of the longest screen times is one of the Predators, who Alexa Woods ends up teaming up with and forming quite an unlikely duo with some good moments of comedy and action.
I suppose it's one of the elements of the Versus film as well. Is there's always an element of team up, the sort of enemy of my enemy type thing going on, and that's certainly the case in some of the films that we've talked about already in the Versus genre.
But I guess the thing I really wanted to get onto with this as my sort of trope. So Alexa Woods has a bit of a backstory. She's an incredibly badass woman in her chosen field, which I believe is she's a hardcore tour guide for extreme situations. She sort of oversees parties who are going to inhospitable places in extreme conditions under great stress and making sure that everybody does what needs to be done and survives, which is why she's been brought on in this. She's an expert in surviving in the Arctic, and hence she's part of the posse. And she does voice her reservations and tries to bin off the job, but Wayland somehow very easily manages to convince her to stick around. So I'm going for it. She's the strong female lead, the badass heroine with a bit of an X Factor background, in that her father, who was also a similarly heroic figure, tragically died whilst trying to scale Everest, I believe, and failed due to a tragic accident. So that's her backstory. And whether or not she needed to have that backstory, whether or not that backstory really adds an awful lot of depth to her character, whether she could actually just be a really strong, independent female character, whether they needed to feel that they needed to dress her up a little bit more to make up for the fact that she hasn't got a penis, I'm not really sure.
Well, I was about to make a point there, but he stopped me in my tracks a little bit.
Penis.
But, penis. I've got penis on the brain now. Coming back to the kind of, because it's inevitable you're going to think of these sorts of franchises, we're coming back to the sort of Ellen Ripley vibe. The interesting thing about her is she's a bit of a nobody, isn't she, really?
She's got the sort of, a believable person that just ended up in the wrong place at the wrong time and just deals with it in a human way, like a relatable.
And you see that evolution over the series of the films, I suppose, from to the kind of, the ultimate badass moment is that kind of the get away from her, you bitch moment, isn't it? With the power loader and the flamethrower and the pulse rifle. But we've got a lesser amount of time to deal with characters, so I guess these are preloaded. It's not so much exposition, it's through heavy amounts of backstory in this that we find out about Alexa Woods.
I guess they're just trying to establish her credentials, like you say, in a short period of time. Like we're not fussed. We all know you want to get onto the good stuff, the action. We want as little preamble as possible so that we can get into the good stuff, the gory stuff, the stuff you all paid to see.
Yeah, which I think we'll unpack in a little while.
Now, Jim's second trope.
You mentioned it a little bit already, thinking about my second trope. You mentioned the idea of the sort of development of the backstory, and we get a lot of it through Alexa Woods. And I suppose the most interesting part of her character is her adaptability and the way she sort of teams up with the Predators. Their mission kind of goes a bit tit skyward, doesn't it?
They get a bit cocky, in my opinion. They get a bit like overconfident.
Yeah, just taking their helmets off around alien eggs and just, sitting about and doing weird little flicky wrist actions things with their little boomerang things and things like that.
Just a bit of like just showing off, really, isn't it? Being a bit show pony.
Yeah, big squidgy net thing that constricts around people. Yeah, they do showboat. They've got a sense of showmanship. I'll give them that. And that kind of links me to this idea of my second trope being the red shirts that we talked about in the past. Now, if you don't know what a red shirt is, guys, you need to watch more Star Trek, clearly.
Particularly the original Star Trek TV series with Big Bill Shatner. Because without fail, if there was an away mission, the people in there wearing red, they'd be gone. They wouldn't even get dialogue. They'd just die almost instantly. And way before Kirk lost his shirt and had to do a gladiatorial fight scene or bed the beautiful blue woman or whatever else he had going on that day.
Yeah, they were getting nowhere near them blue women, were they?
Not a
the red
chance.
shirts. Don't even think about it, mate. Don't even bother getting a Tinder profile about that. That's not going to happen. The humans in this are largely disposable. They're kind of just cannon fodder, aren't they? Really, they're either one of two things. They tend to be, as per the preamble, a way of generating more xenomorph aliens, or being kind of establishing the threat of the predators early on. Because whether you've got a big gun or not, it doesn't really seem to make a difference. You're seen as a threat, but you're taken out pretty easily by these things.
That's an interesting point as well in the film, because the predators don't really get involved until the humans have set the temple in motion, so that the humans find a sort of sarcophagus which has got like 3 guns in it, which are predator guns, and the predators only start taking interest once the humans have removed the guns. And I think a big part of them earning their stripes or wings or whatever is getting said gun and using it to vanquish all the aliens.
Yeah, I think that's right, isn't it? It's that they're largely just collateral damage, and we know that with Wayland's attempt at dispatching a predator with the Lynx Africa, they don't really bother until they're either obviously attacked or they kind of interfere with the aspect of their ritual, which is based on this kind of supposedly centuries and millennia old tradition that they've established.
To be a worthy adversary, like trophy worthy. Hence, Wayland doesn't make the cut because he's a bit carcinogenic.
I mean, why are they there in the first place? Is that properly established? Why they? Is it just like because it's an archaeological thing, or
it's just sport? It's just. I think they kind of explain it in the film as Earth was a backwater planet, not particularly advanced, and it was a perfect place to do their training exercises, their rites of passage, where they'd ship a load of these alien things. We're not sure of the genesis of the aliens, the xenomorphs, but the predators happen to know about them and have basically formed a system where we're just pawns in a very fucked up game of chess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fairly flimsy contrivance, isn't it? There's a lot of sort of supposed history and backstory along with it, but what it's tantamount to is holy shit, these two things are having a massive smackdown, or these two species having a massive smackdown, and the humans caught in the middle of it are there to either sort of show the power of these things, and their ability to kind of induce fear, or just serve as kind of just absolute cannon fodder, because that's you have even like the likes of Wayland ultimately is a disposable character. I always find it quite interesting the sort of Colin Salmon's character's kind of shown as a leader, and then he's like skewered in a kebabbed in a big sort of net pretty early on, and all this sort of wider cast of characters is really thinned out pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a grunt in this, you're probably going to suffer a similar fate to the grunts in Aliens, apart from the one who made it all the way through with Ripley. Yeah, they all died in like generally quite stupid ways. I mean, that's kind of another trope in and of itself, isn't it? Like the too stupid to survive thing, where the characters do really irrational things. Like when the pyramid starts reformulating itself, as it does every 10 minutes, to sort of create this labyrinth-style maze to confuse and disorientate all the players involved, to the benefit of the aliens and the predators who have the upper hand.
I mean, hats off to the predator or Inuit architect who did this, because damn, they have earned their
They certainly
crust.
have, but In this situation, like when shit starts happening, do you really just start shouting and screaming to draw attention to yourself? Do you see like some egg things pop up and just stick your face in it and go, oh, I wonder what that is? You know, do you hang out with the person who decided to wear a red colour story that day? I mean...
Yeah, I mean, if you're that guy who gets, you know, let's split up and you get stuck with the guy who's got the fetching crimson you know, bomber jacket on that day, you are going to be shitting your pants because you're on your own soon, son.
And there's a part of me that wonders if it's just worth kind of speeding that process up. You know, maybe the guy in red has a little accident. Let's just call it that.
Yeah, just tip him overboard when he's having a ciggy.
Just give him a little push, a little nudge.
Way. Yeah, that's another thing, isn't it? They make it easier for you to sort of deal with the disposability of these characters because they make such stupid decisions. So, I mean, yeah, the sort of Scooby-Doo sort of let's split up gang. It's kind of
an enforced
kind of thing
in
these sorts of situations.
Though, isn't it, in this?
It's pretty...
like, it's not your archetypal, let's split up to cover more ground. It's kind of like, shit, the pyramid's splitting us up.
It serves to make this... the Alexa Woods character, and I realise saying Alexa...
I did wonder about that, actually.
So, Trope Nuts, if you hear, you know, an AI trying to chip in, that's what's happening. So this is what happens when you're dealing with a movie from 2004 in 2021. I might have to go unplug her soon or change her name to Echo or whatever it is. But yeah, I suppose one of the key benefits of having these sorts of things is it makes both the villains and the protagonist look a bit more capable and kind of back up the fact that, oh yeah, this person is more worthy of having climbed Everest or, you know, overcome adversity in the way that is described and,
I guess
told rather than shown.
That thought crossed my mind as well just now, in that these are sort of competing forces and almost two sides of the same coin, and they could work together quite well in that, like you say, you know, this film makes no bones about what it is. It's not a thorough investigation of the human condition. It's a rip-roaring battle, monster mashup between two alien forces with humans caught in the middle, played for, you know, action, adventure. And so, you know, we've got to have our share of disposable characters, and that offsets for people who are going to probably be in this for the duration, other heroines and heroes, and we'll put a bit more effort into dressing them up and drawing those better. And you don't want to invest your time in people that are just going to die in like 30 seconds.
For sure.
Well, how about that? It's Chris's second trope. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, so what about your second trope then, mate? What are we looking at?
We're taking it back. I feel like this is in the same sort of similar league to Mary Sue for me. I think it's one that we discussed a lot in earlier Trope Storms, and it's always been a bit of a bugbear for us because when it's done badly, it really just leaps out at you. Very lazy, in my opinion. So what I'm rabbiting on about here is foreshadowing. Examples in this film. So foreshadowing, obviously, you know, it's where, to give you an example that's in this film, when Waylon's getting his merry band together at the beginning, once they're on their voyage to Bouvet Island, he basically says, we've got the best drill team on the planet. That turns out to not be true. Spoiler alert. Also, Alexa Woods. Hello, Alexa. 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 Order some Jim Beam.
Stop. We better not go full quantity there. She will skimp me out.
When she's trying to assert some authority, she says, nobody goes anywhere alone. We stay in constant communication. Unexpected things will happen. When they do, don't be a hero. And also the Italian guy with the hammy acting goes on a little bit of a monologue about a hunter's moon or some rubbish. All of this is like setting the stall out for all the things that are about to unfold. It's kind of unnecessary. It's quite lazy, and it's kind of like setting your expectations up very cheaply to kind of do the complete opposite. It's trying to sort of frame it in a way and then completely shatter that for impact. And those are my thoughts.
Okay. Yeah. Because the whole best drill team thing kind of gets made redundant, doesn't it, by the fact that giant laser shot from orbit.
You say giant laser, I can't help but think Dr. Evil. So like Dr. Evil is on the Predator spaceship firing his giant Alan Parsons laser and shooting a hole in the ice.
Yeah, I like the imagery of the Predator doing air quotes with the sort of clicking noise.
Precisely. So yeah, that's kind of like my foreshadowing grumble.
So I mean, what does it lead to? I mean, that's the thing. Is what was it trying to foreshadow? Because a lot of the stuff is the stuff that kind of bears out, this idea of looking after each other and protecting each other. Nobody goes anywhere alone, constant communication, and that's just
it kind of just gives you this roadmap of kind of what to expect as you're going along. It's best drill team, well, they were made redundant, that's awkward. Nobody goes anywhere, they all get split up in a slightly Scooby-Doo-ish way. Stay in constant communication, well, that goes tits up as well. Unexpected things will happen. Big Tetris pyramid thing happens. Turns out Lynx Africa is not the best assault weapon. Turns out that ancient chains used to shackle the alien queen xenomorph aren't great anymore, weren't made acid bloodproof either. And the Hunter's Moon. I don't know why that really wound me up because it was just so wanky.
It's on the nose, isn't it?
It's
really
just like, seriously? Did you need to say that? Come on. Yeah.
No, we know the Hunters.
Come on. I mean, at least don't insult my intelligence. Assume that I might have seen a Predator film.
This is Star at Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, and sharp, immortal actor Sean Bean. And you're listening to Tropestormers, you bastards.
So how are we going to score this in, Chris? Because we've been positive and negative, I think in fairly equal measure about a lot of this. But how are we going to look at it in terms of the tropes themselves?
Let's go through chronologically, shall we? We'll go back, rewind to your first trope, which was the aliens all along. How do we feel about that?
I think of the things I've seen with this, I mean, I think it's a bit of, if I'm honest, it's a bit of a sort of, we talked about the most heinous example of the indie
Kingdom of
Who Shall Not Be Named movie, and that does not exist. I think this is one of the better examples of it. I think they kind of, by the sounds of it, studio interference kind of meant that they had to do some kind of mental gymnastics and writing gymnastics to be able to do this, and this kind of trope kind of helped with that. And I actually think in terms of, I get in two minds about it really, because it is pretty like, right, okay, Mayan pyramid 200 feet below the ice, aliens being responsible for all the technology and all that sort of thing. It's a bit sort of well-worn territory, but there's that opening sequence where you have the kind of nuking of the hunt and the kind of the predators in power stance standing above like
conservative power
Mayan
stance
civilizations. It does look pretty cool.
The cutaway sequence I quite liked. I didn't mind it. It's kind of neat. It's not particularly original, but it's kind of executed fairly well and kind of gives a nice framework to work within to explain things. It is quite elaborate when you think like, oh, by the way, like aliens are responsible for everything. It's very neat in that respect, but they don't particularly overplay it. It's kind of just like, turns out that, all of our great advances were because of aliens so that they could basically hunt us and to basically turn us into cattle. But at no point was just like, oh God, the aliens all along thing again. Aye. That's my take. That's kind of my takeaway.
Yeah, it's sort of the leg up, isn't it? To sort of say it's a good reason for the human characters to be involved in the sense that they would be interested in if they found something like this, they would be interested in finding out what it is. So yeah, I kind of like it. I think it's done well, and some of the shots that you get from it are pretty great, especially that kind of big. I can't remember. Does Scar activate his nuke in the end? I think he does, doesn't he?
I think the really good segue that they have when they're discovering about the history, there's a bit where when it all goes wrong, and they're at the top of like Machu Picchu or an equivalent, and there's just hundreds, if not thousands, of xenomorph aliens scaling it, and the predators are like being overwhelmed. and they're like trying to fight them off, and then they just blow the whole thing to Kingdom Come. It's quite an epic scene. So, I mean, we're making pretty positive noises about this. So, I think we have a point, a utopian point there. Okay, one now.
Let's give it a utopian point. Well done, Av, for your first utopian point. We went to your next one, which was kind of the
strong female
tragic
lead.
backstory slash.
Yeah, I want to open by saying I'm
character.
not opposed to strong female leads. Obviously, like Alien is possibly my favorite horror film and would make my top 10 all-time films. I'm definitely not averse to a strong female lead. But like we discussed earlier, what makes Ripley so brilliant is that she's the every woman, wrong place, wrong time, and deals with the situation, well, probably like in a quite a human way, that ends up with her being quite badass because she has such levels of fortitude and bravery, but she's also quite vulnerable at the same time. And I don't think quite the same is true of Alexa Woods. Early noughties, having a black female lead is great for sort of inclusivity. Her as a character, she doesn't irk me, but it does feel like we were saying, having that backstory about her father and everything, it just feels a bit tagged on just to kind of up her sort of heroic stakes and flesh her out as a character, whereas she could have just been amazing at what she did. And also she's kind of got the tragicness because of her father, and that doesn't sit so well with me in a kind of patriarchal sort of a way. Like she's being, some of her validation is coming from her father rather than her as a person.
Yeah, I guess she gets validated by a male predator.
I don't know. Do we know the genders of predators?
As well.
Do predators have the same sex-gender setup that we do? We assume they're men.
I don't know. Yeah, Scar could be female. We don't know. Yeah, good point. Almost, it might be better if she just started out as being like this. She's a clever, capable scientist. I think that's what works well about some of the characters in something like The Thing, is that they are they're just these like nerds really, but they sort of rise to the occasion. They sort of team together, and in that film in particular, it's about mistrust and distrust. Whereas Alexa has to put her. I might have set her off again. The A-Dog has to set.
Alexa, order a magnum of Moe and Chandon.
Yeah, I think, but on her own merit, really. I mean, she teams up with the Predator, and that she kind of has to display that ultimate trust with them, despite having, them being responsible for killing her colleagues and in part, and being responsible for the whole thing. She kind of rises to the occasion to sort of ensure her own survival for however short-lived that might be, given the fact she's
doesn't that kind of
dressed
render
like Lara
her
Croft
whole
in the cold.
backstory somewhat obsolete in that she teams up with one of the Predators and he's not going to know a jot about her backstory. He won't give a damn. He only sort of took note of her or allowed her to join his team when she inadvertently killed a xenomorph. Like, he doesn't give a jot about her backstory. He doesn't know it. It's irrelevant. So he takes her on merit, on what she sort of achieved in battle, if you will. So surely that's kind of, that on its own would be enough justification for an audience in a sense. And like you say, she could just be really good in her field at what she does.
So I think we're both agreeing that
it's
the tragic backstory is laid on a bit too thick.
Heavy-handed in its application.
Sure.
I don't really see how it really helped flesh out her character. Yeah, it's a
okay, so those tropes have cancelled each other out. Yeah. The red shirts. Again, I don't know. I feel like if I'm comparing this to Predator, in which there's a very similar sort of level of, there's a similar number of people who are in focus. I think there's probably a lot more in this one who are disposable, but you have a set of characters who are ultimately disposable. But in the Shane Black film, you do get a bit of an affinity with some of the characters, including Shane Black himself actually plays one of the mercs. Whereas in this one, like you say, you've got Colonel Guile, you've got Spud, you've got Colin Salmon
as Moon Italian.
Yeah, the hunky Italian underwear model / scientist. I don't know. They serve a purpose in the sense that this is all about the verses, right?
So we're moving on to foreshadowing now. Yeah, I kind of feel like gave it a fairly good account previously. I don't really have an awful lot more to add in that it's verging on Mary Sue territory. It can have a purpose if it's done subtly, but here it kind of just felt like, okay, guys, start of the film. Here's what to expect. I'm going to, lay out a little roadmap for you, and we're going to visit all of these places. Or are we? Ooh, we're going to subvert it, maybe. It doesn't really help or add anything. It's not like you go through the film and you're like, wait a second. I thought they had the best drill team on the planet. Now they're completely redundant. They're going to be... Well, these people aren't sticking together at all. Does no one listen to orientation? For God's sake, people. She's wasting her breath. She's only world class at what she does, and you're not bloody listening to them, are you? None of these were my thoughts whilst watching the film. So it just feels a trifle unnecessary and just a very lazy approach that doesn't really add. Kind of pointless. Their end of my rant.
Yeah, I don't know whether they'd just be better off just sort of leaving the human characters to what they are, really. I mean, I quite like the sort of Wayland moment. I think it's all right having the sort of, he's got unfinished business sort of illness backstory to him. That's plenty enough, really, without adding all the sort of blood moon or hunter's moon or kind of... You have the sort of handsome European scientist guy who's very, he's just got all this sort of bullshit kind of knowledge.
Yeah, he's also able to read a lot of dead languages. He's got a little bit of Mary Sue in him. Just saying. It's not looking good for foreshadowing.
Yeah.
I can't
it's not looking
find
good.
A positive
note. It's not looking good, mate, for that trope.
To sort of justify its existence. Obviously, all films do have elements of foreshadowing, but we are looking at the tropes and we're looking at how they're executed. We're looking at how it plays out in the film. And in this Tropestormer's humble opinion, this has not been done well.
Well, by my humble maths, that doesn't add up
it's
brilliantly well for this film.
The jaws of the defeat as things stand.
Well, I had in reserve the auxiliary trope being the actual versus trope itself. It's. I'm afraid it's dystropia for A.V.P. So sorry about that, guys.
It's how we roll.
But them's the breaks. Mr. Xeno, Mr. Predator, Mrs. Predator.
Alexa.
We haven't established gender in
Amazon.
this instance.
Yeah.
Them's the breaks, I'm afraid. But in terms of the versus aspect of it, how do you think this... Do you think this is like a good... In the versus genre, do you think this is a good addition?
I'll say that initially when I saw it in the cinema, I really enjoyed it. And when I rewatched it for Tropestormers, similarly, although a lot of the stuff we've discussed tonight, there's eye roll moments, but overall, it's still an enjoyable, silly space romp.
The Tropestormers have reached a verdict. Dystropia.
But for Alien vs. Predator, I'm afraid, as much as we enjoyed elements of you, it is dystropia. And we'll look at other films in these franchises to come and see if they can improve on that. I quite like to look at Predators. I think Predators is quite an interesting one to look at.
That was a surprisingly good film.
That's right, yeah. But maybe we'll have a bit of a stopgap break before we get back into this. Obviously, of the versus things that have been we haven't mentioned that are more famous, and I would say this is probably one of the better versus films if you think about things along the lines of Godzilla v. Kong, obviously, is a recent addition. The jury was out on things like Batman versus Superman. Yeah. So we'll perhaps look at these. Yeah. And there's also a twist, isn't there? The twist ending, which we'll finish on, which we haven't mentioned, but it didn't score too well initially.
I loved that twist in the cinema. I didn't see it coming, and I thought, oh wow, this really opens things up for a rip-roaring sequel. For the uninitiated, the twist that we're alluding to is when the Predator people depart Earth, old Scarface was being a bit slack with his mask earlier on in the temple, and he got attacked by one of the alien facehugger things.
The original anti-masker.
Whilst he's lying prostrate dead on a table in the alien spacecraft and Earth is going into the distance in space, a weird little alien predator hybrid mashup thing bursts out of his chest and roars. And that's what we're left with, which I thought was a great ending.
And roll credits. Yeah, it's pretty great and sets up a very mediocre sequel. So maybe that's a trope storm for another day. Suggestions, but if you've got any other suggestions as well, dear listener, Trope Naut, do let us know if there's any sort of things in the Versus canon we've not mentioned, or you might like us to mention or talk about. We also do a secondary podcast called Storm and a Tea Break sometimes and often, which looks at such things and individual tropes in greater detail. So check the back catalogue and the future for those.
If you'd like to get in touch with the show, we'd love to hear from you. If we've got anything wrong, if you think we're wrong, you're entitled to your opinion, of course, but our judgments are final. But you can get in touch with the show, our shiny website, tropestormers.com, or if you want to write to us, it's tropestormers@gmail.com, and we're on the socials at Tropestormers. So please reach out, ask us questions, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you.
Right, mate. I'm off to throw my Alexa against the wall just before I go all Luddite and destroy my technology. That leaves us with just enough time to say, as we always say here on Tropestormers,
when the rest of the world was still scrabbling around in the dirt, flinging poo at each other.
And we'll see you.
Take care.
Real soon, hopefully.
Bye.
Take care. Bye for now.
Alexa, order some Jim Beam.